here, I'm still here, breathing. Let me be the dove fly, so why not I in the storm?
Hello, I'm Jason, and welcome to Still Here. This is part one of a two-part episode where we speak with Patrick Sulley to learn from his experience of being a caregiver for his wife. Still Here is for the purpose of other caregivers to learn and listen to one another. Thank you for tuning in. Patrick.
Yes.
Welcome. Welcome to the inaugural podcast. I'm so thankful it's you. I'm really thankful that we got to connect before today to be able to speak so I could understand your story better. But we have an opportunity here to share your story and your wife's story to other listeners, and
Exactly.
and to be able to use our story or use your story for that purpose. And so without further ado, let's get right into it. And if you can kind of take us to the beginning of this for you.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks because it's been quite a journey. And I understand this is primarily for caregivers who really don't have any resources at their disposal right now. So the more they can get, the better. My experience has definitely been an interesting experience. And taking it to the front, I guess, my wife and I mean, we've been together probably about 37 years, married 35 and better, and all joyful years.
Yeah.
And, we've had quite a run. We've had quite a good life together. I mean, we've been in business together for over 30 years, separately and together, and a variety of businesses. So we've been moderately, somewhat successful, I would say. So able to take care of ourselves for sure.
Okay.
And within that whole framework, I mean, we had a great life. I mean, we had the opportunity to travel, which was a passion of ours, through over 110 countries in the world. And even today, she still blogs about that. So that was really fortunate for us. And it's something that we really wanted to do. So, in that, we had a really good time, and we really had a lot of really good adventures that, would be envious for a lot of people, I'm sure. And certainly a lot of good times, good experiences, and managed to consume a couple of bottles of wine there along the way, probably. Yeah.
Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah. Well, I'm not driving out of here, are you?
No.
Yeah. So the bottom line, though, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we got together in the late 80s, and fast forward right through to 2019, we decided that, it was time. So we decided to sell our last assets and finally, absolutely, totally retire. Mm-hmm. And so what we were going to do then is, formulate the countries we hadn't been to, and go out and just really enjoy ourselves like most people would when they retire. Right. And we had a couple of months, so we traveled a touch there. And then after Christmas of that year, so into January 2020, we started traveling in earnest again. And we went to Costa Rica for a while, a couple of weeks. We'd been there a couple of times before, so this was a pick and choose kind of trip. So, and then we spent a couple of weeks going through Colombia. And that was obviously a lot of fun and a great experience. So fast forward in through February, when we were about to return, as I mentioned to you, the world was now becoming curious and consumed with that funny sickness that was going around in Wuhan in China.
Yes.
And nobody knew anything about it. So we moved on from there. I mean, COVID was happening. Nobody knew what it was. And we returned home. And so we're talking early March now, and then we go into lockdown. So when we went into lockdown, we were just and my wife and I had been very used. We've been locked at the hip pretty much, joined at the hip for our whole lives pretty much. We had kids and everything, but, they're all grown up and stuff. And so we knew each other very, very well. And as you would imagine, and then in lockdown, we were face-to-face 24/7 like everybody else.
Right.
At the end of that lockdown period, it became pretty obvious that we had some issues, and that, I was suspicious about dementia, even though I had been suspicious before. Mm-hmm. There were things that were happening. Friends would ask me, how'd you guys make out? And I'd say to them, well, I'm pretty good, but Anita didn't come through okay, And of course, nobody really knew what to make of that and whatever, but it was true. So I'm going to back up a little bit right here now, because now that the cat is out of the bag, so to speak, it's always interesting. I'm really familiar with caregivers. I know a lot of caregivers. This is 2025. That was 2020. So I've had quite a run now. And being in a support group for caregivers for several years, which is an amazing thing. I've come to know what their experiences are and what they come into, and also what they don't know and what I didn't know. And so that was a really, really strong and unique shared experience. So, and one of the big things is like, you don't know that you're a caregiver. I mean, I never wanted to be a caregiver. Yes. I didn't know what a caregiver was. I never ever wanted to be a doctor or, anybody that worked in the healthcare system. Not that I was selfish or anything, but, I just wanted to do other things. But I really never considered that I would be a person that would be called a caregiver at any point in time in my life. And most of these people are the same way. So, if I back it up a little bit, professionals would ask me like a question of like, well, what was your earliest indicator? And so that's where I'm going now. So my wife, Anita, she had several things that were very unique to her. And one of them was that she was definitely an avid gardener. And the other one, her father taught her how to garden when she was just a little girl. Like, she has pictures of her sitting in the garden and him planting and teaching her stuff. And when she's like 2.5, a little tiny toddler. And so it's a sweet relationship, between her and her father. And even today now, she remembers him really well, knowing that he was a gardener. Yeah. So that is pretty sweet on her, side of the coin.
Yeah. You mentioned it when we were talking about emotional memory, and just about even when your visits, there's an emotional memory there. We can come back to that.
Yeah, but that is a good point.
There's a real power in that. It goes to a deeper level. So, anyway, but sorry, continue.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the things, and they both came from the garden originally, and I'm going to back it up to about 2013, 2014. And she came in one day. I mean, she was working in the garden quite a bit. She's a pretty extensive garden, as you can imagine. Regarding gardening, she was one of the founding members and graduates of the Master Gardening Program for Atlantic Canada. So that was really substantial, and she served on the executive and everything. So she came in from working in the garden one day, and we were about to have lunch and stuff, and she just looked at me and said, she said, I'm just humming, and I can't stop humming. I said, that's no problem. That's okay. It's not a big deal. So what do you mean, like, you can't stop humming? She said, I've been doing it for a while now, and it's like, everything I do, like everywhere I go, I've got this humming going on in my head. And I just can't stop it. And obviously she was more serious and concerned than that. But, so, I like music and stuff. So I said, look, it can't be a big deal. I said, just think of another song.
Right.
That's anybody
solved.
Would say, common sense, right? Yeah. Like put on some music and lock into a different tune and start singing it over like, like I would do, like you would, do, whatever. And she said, it doesn't work. I said, well, try it. Like give it a shot, right? Try it. And anyway, off she goes. And a couple of days later, same thing. And no, I can't do it. I said, is it like a different one all the time? She said, no, it's the same one all the time. And I said, well, it'll pass. It'll pass. Like whistle, do something, read a book.
Trying to be encouraging, trying to be distracting.
Trying to be supportive and and I didn't really think much of it, to be honest, because, why would I really think too much of that? I know this person really, really well. She loves to sing and dance and jump around and be at party, So very effervescent personality. And so I really didn't give it a lot of credit, But then, I started, now that my attention was perked over the course of the next couple of months even, I did take note of that. And I did note that, in the kitchen, she was going back and forth doing routine things, unconsciously doing, your normal things that you would do, prepare dinner or whatever. And she was humming. Same kind of tune, unrelated to anything. And unconsciously, just going back and forth. And then I noticed it more and more and more, and I started to pay attention to it. And it's like, and then I talked to her a little bit about it, and she said, I just can't do it. And then she started to, over time, get very depressed. And then she came clean with me and said, I'm really concerned that I'm getting dementia. And I said, why would you be concerned that you're getting dementia? You seem fine to me, And she said, excuse me, she said that my mother was humming just like this before she got dementia. So, that's pretty emphatic. And then I really stood up and took notice. And I said, well, I've been around you all the time, and I don't see any other indicators than that. I mean, your memory is fine. Your conversation is fine. The flow is good. I mean, you're not, you're able to go about functioning. You're doing things. And she was physically very fit. We walked a lot, that kind of stuff, worked out.
One of the things that you remember when you talked about it being a millimeter to a mile.
Yeah, I was just about to get to that. You brought it up.
Very good.
So it's almost like a megaphone effect.
Yeah.
And you can already see it happening here.
Yeah.
Because now we're moving into like a year even, or a couple of years. Because, but it starts, here's the big deal about it is that, as I said, like being a caregiver and other caregivers that I know, they have no idea that this is coming. And they have no idea, and I certainly didn't have any idea that I was going to be doing it. But it begins, like as you said, as a millimeter, and it goes for a long, long time, little tiny bit. But over the course of, I'm going to say, this has been 10 years since then or more, it became a megaphone. So it's like that for miles and miles and miles, and then broadens way out. Sorry for going into your screen.
It's a powerful image. No, you go right ahead. It's a powerful image.
But it's true. And that's exactly the way it is. Like if you look at this table and put a pen mark at the end of that table, and then you drew those lines even longer, it takes a very, very long time for anybody to take note that now it's this wide.
Right. And
it took me a long, long time.
And that's someone that's with that person, right? Like you said, you're attached to the hip, to you and your wife spend time together. You
Absolutely.
were each other's lives. And one of the beautiful things you talked about is how you were kind of like that, full person, but there was like a third of a shared and actually the idea of that, what you talked about, like your wife filled these gaps for you and you filled gaps for her.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of a marriage. But to be with that person as much as you are and to not be able to discern those subtle differences over that time is challenging. Yeah.
It's very challenging because, you know each other so well. And it's like in Barry Maguire, it's like, you complete me.
Right.
But it's like we came from the same place, so we obviously got along really, really well. And we've had our moments, of course, but at the end of the day, I had that 1/3 that she didn't, and she had that 1/3 that I didn't,
right.
And so we had the package together, and we knew it. So, but so going forward, that was really the first and the most early indicator. The other one was the fact that, as I mentioned, she was a master gardener. And what was really evident and indicative of another early indicator was that she really started forgetting the names of the plants. Now, albeit it's like she had 800 different species of hosta, for instance. She was the third highest collector of hosta in Canada at one time. And so anybody would have difficulty with some of it, but the Latin names especially, they went first. And then it was gradually the common names. So that was another indicator. That was really first and foremost when I started seeing that. So fast forward back to 2019 and 2020, for instance. We knew we had a problem. She went into very deep depression. She was talking to somebody about it. They gave her, some kind of exercise called mindfulness and that kind of stuff, which I'm not that familiar with. But she seemed to work with that for a while, but it really didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, I mean, it obviously gradually got worse, and that megaphone effect. So jumping ahead a little bit, I talked to our doctor. And so this is for a caregiver's perspective, this would be on a must-do list. As in, first of all, like you need to get your doctor on side, your family doctor, and it's not easy. There's several reasons for that. But basically, I worked with our doctor for 2 whole years before I could definitely get something out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And, he didn't really pay much attention to it at first, but it was really obvious to me, and I was telling him all the time. So over the course of that 2 years, I mean, I actually had like almost confrontations with him because he wasn't allowing me into the meeting with her. And she was coming out saying, he told me I'm fine, I don't have dementia, et cetera, et cetera. And so it just wasn't working out. So finally, I guess to, jump over a bunch of hurdles here, finally, what I did, I went in and I saw him and I said, in the last year, my wife has lost 25 to 27 pounds. And I said, she's never lost 25 to 27 pounds. Mm-hmm. And I said, I also noticed on her forehead, there's a very dark area. And I'm really concerned that she might have cancer. Like she might have a tumor or brain cancer. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind that maybe these things are causing what's going on. Maybe it's not dementia, And that was the moment that he put her forward for CT scan. And the scan came back and basically there was a dark area there. And he basically put her forward for a potential assessment at neurology. And that was a giant major leap. So the other thing on a must-do list would definitely be to get a diagnosis.
An assessment, as you would say.
Yeah. And basically, though, a diagnosis of what is this that we're dealing with.
Okay.
And if you, there are a couple of holes in the situation in the fact that, in my opinion, your family doctor is not set up to do that through the testing that they have. I mean, the testing is so mild that, consider this. I knew for 2 years that we had an issue. Mm-hmm. And every time she went in and did that little, which was only a couple of times, that little assessment that they do from memory and everything, she came out fine. But she wasn't fine. I mean, I'm with her all the time. I know she's not fine. So the test is not sufficient. Mm-hmm. They need to get it earlier, and they need to pay attention when people are talking to them about it, because it's pretty much it's a pandemic almost in itself, the way I see it. And they need to get out the gate, and get with the program. I mean, they don't have the testing that they should have right now. Mm-hmm. And I am definitely the first to say that, because the experience to take 2 years to get to that, you need to get on top of this really early. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, you can't, without a diagnosis, you can't get access to any programs whatsoever, like any supports, any systems, nothing. So that's critical.
Yeah. To be a strong advocate is really difficult for a lot of people, like to find their voice, so to speak. And with your background in business and having that confidence, that's one thing. But there are other people that would have to advocate, and it's not their strength necessarily. Mm-hmm. So, but it's such a necessity, because you really do have to speak on behalf of also what you're seeing and the care and well-being of your loved one. So it's a lot of responsibility, but to be encouraging to those caregivers out there that this is a necessary part.
Thank you. Yeah, they do have to do it. Mm-hmm. They have to do it. Not everybody wants to take on their family doctor, because you'll be without a doctor pretty soon in a lot of cases, and we're already down 30%. So, I mean, they got the power, as they say, right?
Yeah. We love doctors. My father was a doctor. We love doctors.
Oh, yeah,
but I mean,
they're people like anybody else, and they see a lot of people, so they're only fallible like we're fallible, and so it's like, give them credit, they're doing a great job, but they can do better. And so after that moment, there was another moment that came through. Like, obviously, they get back to you and they say, when can we see this person? Being, in this case, my wife. And came back, it was going to be like 18 to 36 months.
Yeah.
I said, like, this is crazy.
Mhm.
And as I mentioned to you once before, when you're a caregiver, when you ask for help, you're already at the end of your rope. I mean, there's no rope left.
Mhm.
So it's like now that you finally got in and people are starting to take note that, yes, Houston, we got a problem. Now you got to wait like anywhere from like a year and a half to 2 to 3 years. And so that doesn't work.
Mhm.
So anyway, what I did at that point in time, I harnessed some friends that I had, and I had a neighbor that was really helpful. She's a PhD clinical psychologist, and she took a day off, and she knew Anita, my wife, because we're friends as well.
Mhm.
And she's been like chronicling what's going on anyway. So and she took note on it. And she took the day off and the next day to call all her colleagues and see on my behalf if there was anybody that could see her, to do a diagnosis or at least some kind of an assessment to say, bingo, we do or we do not have something. And she came back, she had 3. So one was a cancellation within about 2 weeks. And she cautioned me. She said, it could cost like $5,000. It could cost $15,000. I don't know, because these people charge different rates. And so I said, what's a life, right? So let's do it.
And as you said, you're at the end of your rope at this point. So
Well, I did learn how to tie knots though.
Okay, good. Good analogy.
So I could join some rope afterwards, which I had to do. But
fantastic.
Anyway, so she did that, and I took that appointment because it was going to disappear like immediately. And so I explained that to Anita, and of course there was huge denial, which there had been all along, right from the very beginning. Once through the depression, and once it obviously started getting better, and we started bringing up the topic, she went into like massive and complete denial. It's really difficult to help anybody when they're in complete denial. Mm-hmm. And but she was a strong woman, and I can see that. I knew that was there. But the fact of the matter is that it did not make it easy. So what that incurred for us was really the fact that she didn't want to go. She didn't want to be diagnosed or assessed or anything to do with psychology or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she jumped up and down, stamped her feet, bounced up and down the stairs, screeched and screamed, and let her voice be known.
Right.
And but anyway, so I finally, she came down, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, she said, "When are we going?" I said, "Aces, we're good." I told her, and that was great. So over the next few days, I think I took an hour and I went somewhere to do something or other. And I came back, and she was all happy, smiling and everything, jumping up and down, giddy. I did it. You did what? I canceled the appointment. I don't need to go there.
Right.
I don't have dementia. I'm perfect. And I said, obviously, I said, what? And I had a lot more to say than that. I tried to convince her that, in a very emphatic way that, this had to happen. We have to do this because, we have to know what's going on. You can't get help unless you know what's going on. And if you don't, they'll know, right? So let's go find out. I mean, basically, if you had cancer, the problem here, I'm going to jump out for a second, is that, i.e., if you have something like cancer, bad as it is, you have it. You know physically that you have something wrong.
Right.
You can look at it and say, you're getting tired, you're getting lethargic, you're getting whatever, but you're rational in your thinking, and and your close ones know that you have an issue. But with dementia, you don't have that big sign up there that says, I'm hurting, because it's psychological. And it's like, you cannot envision the fact that you are ill. Mm-hmm. Why would you? Right. And don't forget, you got blockages that are preventing that from happening.
Yes.
So you can't cross that line.
Mm-hmm.
And so her being who she is, she took it upon herself to make that cancellation. And, me being who I am, I took it on myself to very hardly convince her that this was not the right way to go.
Right.
She won.
Yeah.
She won.
Yeah. I appreciate the complexity of what you were just talking
Good,
about.
yeah.
It just again, supporting anyone in a mental health crisis is very difficult.
It must be.
Well, and you're a lot of times, again, people are looking for the physical signs.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of, as you were talking about earlier, that the millimeter to a mile or the megaphone, the idea that a lot of these things are hard to put your finger on. And sometimes is that the person's personality or is that what they're struggling with? And then again, the complexity of the fact that their processing is inhibited.
Yeah.
And so, so I just wanted to acknowledge the complexity of what you were dealing with in that moment.
Yeah. And so, just to continue, it didn't get any better. And there's nothing, over the course of time, I came up with a little saying is really good right now, is there's no good news in a bad news story.
Mm-hmm.
So this story just does not get better. The dementia does not get better. And so you're going down a line that is just getting narrower and narrower all the time. So anyway, just to back it up though, back to this appointment thing, the next thing I did, I went back to my friend and said, we've blown it. And I said, there were two others there. Can we get access to them?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were farther out, like 3 months, maybe 2 months. And she said, I'll phone them and I'll try it. And she did. And yes, they did have some room available. Now, these guys were already booked out like 18 months. They're busy, right? Even though it's a private practice and it's expensive, like they are very busy.
Right.
So I took the next one. I forget, I think it was about 3 months. And then I took the next one. I mean, ultimately, she canceled them exactly the same way as she canceled that one, with the same method and everything, because, she was like fiercely in denial. I really don't know how I can really describe the denial to you unless I said there's a brick wall there and you're not going through it, and she is equally as fierce about it today.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm there and I'm still left with neurology, which is 18 to 36 months. And now I'm past, we're in a September timeframe right now. And I'm going to say that this is 2022. And I'm now, say, at the end of September into October, and I really don't know what I'm going to do. Like I'm at one of those, moments where you have nowhere to turn. I remember saying to a friend that I always have answers, but I just don't have an answer to this. And, there was no straws to grasp at. I mean, I just didn't know. And so as a caregiver, you're lost there. And again, that's why you need that kind of help early, because they don't respond. I mean, there's no one there.
Yeah. A feeling of hopelessness.
Well,
just must be.
It's just like you're lost in the wilderness.
Yes.
And it's like a desert and there's no North Star. So what happened though is then the light turned on and like some star-crossed somewhere, and I got a phone call from neurology. So we have a cancellation, and we have a cancellation in late November, and we want you to take it. I said, it's mine. Put me down, right? And I'm just like ecstatic. Wow. Well, so there's light at the end of the tunnel here. And so I say, can I talk to you for a second? Or can I talk to whomever? And so I was able to do that. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to get her there. And they say, well, you have to lie to her. And I said, well, yeah, but I mean, she has to believe it, And I said, regardless of what I say to her in terms of a lie or a frame up or, a diversion or anything else, she's not going in there. She will not go in there. I can't even get her into the dentist's office. I can't get her into the doctor's office. Like she adamantly will not go in there if she sees a hospital door or anything. He said, well, you'll just have to get her here. I said, leave it with me.
Therapeutic lying.
Yeah. That's the terminology they use, therapeutic lying. And I mean, I told him, I said, look, I've been lying to my wife for years.
That's about
I'm really good at it.
That's about your
I mean,
golf
your
score.
little white lies and all that stuff,
Yeah.
But I mean, everybody does it. And so I said, like, I'm as professional as anybody else. I can be creative.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, at the end of the day, in this situation, I have tried everything I can. And I do know that this is going to be difficult. And so anyway, time came. And so I said, we're going to go down and we have to actually go into a memory clinic. Our family doctor wanted you to do this and just wanted to make sure that, you did not have dementia. And so I framed it up that way. And so after, obviously a little bit of, unwelcome discourse, we finally, that day came and we got on the road, went down there, and I parked in the underground garage because, it would be less obvious. Because, there's a entourage of different things and entrances you can use there. And went up in the elevator and into the foyer, and we were obviously in the hospital. And so right away, she became very suspicious. Anyway, just to get past that point, we did get in to see neurology. They talked to me and her extensively, individually together, and they ran tests. I think actually in that session, I actually went home for a couple hours because they needed to talk to her more. Then at the end of that whole session, we all sat down together, and they looked at Anita and they said, "I'm sorry, but you have dementia." And she jumped up and she went crazy. And of course, I was not surprised. And it was it was not a good moment. And she screeched and screamed and was adamantly in denial that I don't have dementia and you guys are all crazy. You don't know what you're talking about and everything else. And she stormed out of the room into the area and she stormed out the door and they looked, "You better go after her." I said, "I'm not going after her. She's not going to go anywhere without me," because I knew we were tight, And so I stayed and I knew she would come back. I just knew she would. And I stayed and I said, through all of this and all the course of these events, not once did anybody mention the CAT scan. You forgot about it already, didn't you?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Not anybody had mentioned the CAT scan. And so what CAT scan? The CAT scan that got us here. Oh. So the neurologist went to the screen and she blah, 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 and next thing up comes the CAT scan. She said, "Oh, okay." Basically, she looked at it and said, "We're going to have to get you in again. This is indicating a more specialized area, and I have to refer you to a colleague, and he's here, but I'll check with your schedule and I'll get back to you. And we need to take this further." And so she couldn't say any more than that because it was out of her range. In but out. So I said, "Okay. So at least we're talking about the CAT scan. I want to confirm one thing. Is it cancer? Is there a tumor?" And she said, "There doesn't seem to be any indicator that there's cancer or that it's a tumor." Whew. Okay. So good news, bad news. The good news, there was no cancer. The bad news, there was no cancer, which means there was definitely dementia.
So, Patrick, you were just describing to me that moment, and you've been moving towards a diagnosis or trying to get that happening, even just to get to the doctor without being canceled. And so you're in that moment now. Your wife is reacting to that. Anita's reacting to that news, and you're seeing it unfold. As the caregiver, what's happening to you in that moment? How are you seeing it? How are you dealing with it? How are you feeling it? What does it look like for you?
Wow. Well, it's really difficult to verbalize emotions. I think in a way, I was kind of like relieved, but immensely, I was totally overwhelmed. I was in a realization moment. I think that at this moment, right now, right here, our life just changed completely. And that's really where I was. And our life, as every way we knew it, was definitely confirmed that we had a serious issue. And our whole life would change. And it did. It definitely did change. And in every way that, we would be going forward now would be different. And I didn't know what it looked like at the end of the day, but I knew it wasn't going to get any better. And I was, I think I probably had my first smattering of what I would call probably remorse. And remorse not only for me, but for her, in the fact that she just deserved so much more. You know, she had the whole world.
Right.
She had everything she needed. She had me.
Yeah.
But
lucky she did have you.
Yeah.
And the you talked about earlier those hopes, dreams, and expectations. What you had for your life, and in that moment, there is that turning point, crashing in, but then there is that remorse, the grief that goes along with it.
Yeah, and it's early though. It's early in the game, but I mean, you become very human, I think, because here's the person you're in love with all your life, and all of a sudden you find that your worst fears they've come true, and her worst fears have come true, and all your hopes and dreams that you just said have disappeared. I mean, they're no longer there. You can try to get glimpses of them. You can try to get smatterings of them, or as Wallace Stevens once said, you can have rubbings of reality, but I mean, you cannot get the reality back.
Right.
And it's going to gradually disappear into black. Fade into black, I think, is the terminology. Yeah.
Why don't we turn, because a little later on when you tried to do some travel, for instance, which was a passion that both of you had, and how you're trying to embrace again some of that life, as you say, that smattering of life, but then how the complexity of that and the disease and how that basically unfolded. So maybe we'll just go back to your story in that way.
Yeah, well, the next step up from it was obviously the next appointment, though. That's really critical. And the next appointment was on January the 4th, and it was with obviously a specialist in neurology, and they did their testing. And once again, I lied. I got her in there, and she knew it. I mean, she didn't want to be there at all. All the chairs were there. The cafeteria was there. The elevator was there. It was a cold, hard environment. Everybody had a mask on. You had to sign in and all that stuff. So everything was a hurdle. But anyway, they spent the whole day, and they were testing. And at the end of the day, they said, we just can't finish today. So I actually did go home again because they were done with me, and they continued to test Anita. And so we didn't find out anything that day. So then a couple of days later, they called us back in, and they sat us down, and they said, we don't have good news. What we have is that Anita has FTD. I said, FTD.
Yeah.
FTD is a flower service. You call an 800 number or you get online and they deliver flowers. What are you talking about? FTD is what we call frontotemporal lobe dementia. And I said, well, it's still dementia. And then they started explaining it to me. And FTD is a very extreme dementia. And if I can talk a little bit about this, because it's really critical to caregivers, again, for early assessment, because you got to know this as soon as you can. And it doesn't really affect you physically, like her physical well-being is perfect even now. But mentally, it affects all your executive brain functions, your decision-making, your comprehension, your vocabulary, your memory, and again, your overall ability to communicate. And that's where it came in. It only affects 12 to 14% of the population, number one. Number two, which is an important note, is that it hits people early. So it can hit somebody at 45, 40. I know of one person that has a loved one that's like in her early 50s that has it. And and that particular person is at the NS, which is, the hospital here in Nova Scotia. And the real thing about that is that she was so extreme and so violent that they couldn't take her in any LTC, long-term care unit. And that is a very, very important
That was a fear for you, too, in terms of your
situation.
Well,
it was, and I'll kind of get to that, but FTD is often, as you're kind of alluding now, is that often misdiagnosed as psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that became a factor as well. So, but there you go. And the big thing about it is that not only does it start early, but it technically and typically has a very reduced lifespan. So, somebody can have dementia, like there's no really, I'd hate to call it your run-of-the-mill general dementia, but, dementia as people know it. Because I'm not a doctor, I don't know. But 20 years, 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on when they get it. Her family got it in their 80s, like her mother had it in her 80s. She was like around 86, 87, and she lived to be 95. And so we both saw that happen.
Right.
So I wasn't unfamiliar with it.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife knew exactly what it was. That's why she was so fearful.
Right. And that reaction, that panicked reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last thing in the world she always said she wanted was dementia. And so, wow, But so anyway, so the lifespan, when I say reduced, typically it could be like 6-8 years. Could be on the outside 12 years. I look at her today and I don't see, 2 years down the road, because I'm going to say the last 5 years have been really dramatic. That's when it really started taking foothold. So, it's an important thing to do, but how it happens is that their memory, they forget how to chew and swallow, and then they get pneumonia from that. So, from the bacteria in the lung from food stuff, and aspiration pneumonia, or they'll forget the muscle memory on how to take a step up a stair or down a stair, and they'll fall, break their hip. Then they go they go under for the operation, and they never really come out. And so each one is very dramatic. Right. So you don't have that lifespan, and more often than not, that's true.
So with processing all of this for you in this, so are you with a support group at that particular time?
No.
Okay.
I am not.
Okay.
I'm with a no group.
Okay. Okay.
I'm trying to deal with friends and family, but they're getting lost because, they, it's futile. They, God bless them all, they don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't get it. They're not with that reality all the time. And they will go, you say to somebody that, so-and-so has dementia, they think 10 out of 10 right away. They're comatose, they're in a chair, they don't talk, they don't know anybody, that kind of stuff for the most part, or very close to that. So they don't understand that it starts like there and widens out to here. And why would they? Because that's where I was, and that's where I was going, and that's where I came from.
Well, that's the important thing about educating,
Yeah.
Other caregivers, but also other caregivers' families.
Exactly.
Right. So that you can actually have a community built around that.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. If you're not living and breathing it, and when you say, oh, well, Anita's struggling, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right. And until you actually are there living in that and understanding that. But again, that depth of that understanding, even with all of what you're going through, that perception also is challenged.
Yeah. Well, when you say that I have a support group, that is a very well put point, because once we had the diagnosis for FTD, now all the supports fell in place right away. So they went to work through neurology, and they put me in touch with outreach. They put me in touch with behavioral nurses. They put me in touch with psychology that I would utilize later. And they were in touch with me now on a consistent basis. They put me in touch with another thing caregivers should do, like right away, once they get diagnosis, because you can't do anything until you have a diagnosis, is you need to register with the Alzheimer's Society.
Mm-hmm.
And what that gives you then, there are some failings in there, no doubt, because I can be a critic now, because I have feet on the ground. And but they do have some really welcome things. And one of those things is that they have established support groups. And I signed up to, I just got really lucky, because, there's good and bad and everything. Like, some are better than others. But I signed up into a support group that was fairly close to where I live. and it's run by two women that have very much dedicated their lives to this. And one is a retired nurse who her name is Pam, and she has 25 or more years experience in nursing with mental health and dementia, specifically, wealth of experience. And the other lady has had people in her family that had passed due to dementia, and she took it upon herself to learn and advocate and give out as much as she possibly could to really help out anybody with this disease.
Oh.
So you can have anyone, anywhere from 12 to 20 people in there, and everybody shares, you realize, just, you go in there thinking that you're the worst off in the world. And you come out saying, wow, there are a lot worse off than I am right now.
Or the very fact I'm not alone.
Exactly.
And God bless those people that dedicate their lives to these groups. And I'm very happy that you have that group on a personal note.
Me too. I mean, they have been like probably the most foremost helpful event in my life for this discourse. And they just by sharing what your experiences are, and what the knowledge you have at that particular point in time, how they dealt with what they are dealing with. Now you have an education in terms of what steps you can take, almost, or try. So it's like, it's like you all become components of the same page in a way. So obviously there's a lot of generalities, but there's no two dementias the same, because it's unique to the individual.
Right.
So I was now able to go in there, and I was able to talk about, the incessant humming that my wife had. And then I was able to talk about her constant depression and how they dealt with it, and her memory and, things like that. But most of all, I mean, I was able to saying how do you deal with this situation on a personal level? I mean, because for now, since probably, 2022 early or even before that, and as it moved on to further down the road, I mean, and through the COVID sessions, I mean, that was bad enough. But I was in a situation where I would wake up in the morning at 5:30, maybe 6, more often 5:30, and I would go downstairs and I would get a coffee, and I'd try not to make a sound. And I'd try to get an hour to an hour and a half of peace, because that was my window. It was the only opportunity that I would have in over a 2-year period, at least a 2.5 period, if not more, of having some kind of head break apart from sleep.
And that theme of self-care and finding those moments of peace, of reflection, of just being you for a moment, maybe allowing yourself to feel the previous day. Right, because again, processing time must be very difficult to find when you're going through all of this.
There was none.
Right. Well, then that's more than difficult.
No, really, there was none. I mean, honestly, there was none. I mean, I would sit down, I would have a coffee, 2 coffees. My dog would sit on my lap, and we'd look at each other and say, "Wow."
Yeah.
And it wasn't funny at all. It was it was just like peace. And it was a component of the same thing every day. It was Groundhog Day. And so what would happen after that is that then my wife would wake up, and she did a travel blog. She was still doing that. And so she would spend a little time, 15, 20 minutes in bed, catching up on that. And then she'd come down the stairs and start her day, and which became our day as usual, And then I would get ready for the onslaught and the barrage of the same question every 15 seconds. And I would give the same answer every 15 seconds. And the topic might change from the day, but it'd still be the same questioning. And it'd be every moment of the day. And then if it was something that she couldn't comprehend, and we walked the trails a lot, and we got into doing that more so through COVID, but we walked the BLTs and every trail we could access pretty much with our dog for twice a day sometimes. So you'd be walking, we walked a lot. And we'd have these monstrous fights on the trail because there was something that she didn't understand what I said and would disagree with it, and whatever it was in her mind that interpreted what it was, go berserk. And she'd do that like in shopping or in a grocery store or whatever. And we're in a time of Me Too. We're in a time of like domestic violence is now gaining footage, right, as being like endemic to our society. And here's this beautiful woman that nobody knows has dementia chopping the heck out of me in public. And I'm standing there trying to figure out, how do I work this by now so that nobody really thinks I'm beating the heck out of this girl? Because, I mean, because it was really dramatic. And to me, that was very personal. I mean, now it's a perception issue. Like, how do I retain like a sense of self and save face almost in the fact that I have this screaming banshee who like people would think that like, we were in this crazy fight and we're not.
Well, and to react honestly about how you would react in a moment like that and what you would feel attacked or feel angry or upset, but also having that context of her illness in amongst that, but allowing yourself to also process the difficulty of the moment that you're in. A real, you can talk about that.
Well, it's pretty easy, really. I mean, I just maintained my sense of self.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it wasn't her.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was the dementia that was speaking. I knew it wasn't her.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to just process that and just maintain composure and wait until if she stormed off, she would come back, or I would calmly go after her and just smooth it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, but it was a lot of work. I mean, that to your question.
Well, and I think that, again, looking at the caregivers or, who are listening, and to say these moments will happen where things are out of your control and in public domains.
Oh, yeah.
And going through that, and again, that inner fortitude that you have is powerful, and to be able to keep that context clear. But again, not everyone will have that.
No, that's for sure. Well, people do crumble, there's no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself a pretty strong person. But this one did get the best of me by the time I was done. But there are other things too that are important to mention here. It just brings it to mind that talking about upsets. I mean, you also got like a thing like there's nothing out there that says, like, if you're handicapped, for instance, if I can say that, you can get a handicap sticker. People can see that you're probably handicapped or compromised in some way. And, there are events and things that occur around that. But if you have dementia, there's no big sign there. There's no sticker on your forehead. There's no nothing to say when you're going through the checkout that you might take more time or you need a little consideration, or anywhere you go. In particular, when you're crossing the border.
Yes.
I mean, we've crossed the border several times. And one occasion we were driving to the States and we were going to stay down there for a month, which we used to have property down there and we used to winter down there at one time. And so it was normal for us to do that. And so we were going to try and do that. And we went to the border and I said, let me do the talking, right? And she said, yes. And so we got to the border guard and said, let me see your passports, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, where are you going? And she started talking. And she said, we're going to stay the night in Bangor. We don't know where we're going. We don't know how long we're staying. We got lots of time and we're on vacation. So we're going to come back whenever.
Wrong answer.
Wrong answer. And that cost us 40 minutes. Park your car over here, sir, and come into the station, let's say. Mm-hmm. And we want to talk to you. So it took me about 40 minutes to get out of that one. And I had no proof. There's no doctor's letter. There's no accepted standard. There's nothing to say that in any situation that you get in. And there's another situation later on down the road in January 24. I took her to St. Martin. And because I thought it would be, I'll tell you why later. But she started shoplifting, or she was probably doing a little bit of it anyway. But she started shoplifting in earnest when we were in St. Martin. Again, it wasn't her. It was the dementia and part and parcel of it. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? Right. So 6 times in the same shop and back in there, from the beach, whenever on her own. And I was with her a few times and saw her one time, tried to get her from her. She had a scuffle in there, and all it was a box of tea bags, The 6th time, the shop owner, who was a fairly big shop, saw her, looked at her, caught her, security came in, police came in. So now you're in a foreign country, foreign police, they don't speak your language, and you have somebody with dementia who just shoplifted, and they've been watching her, so they know, right? Mm-hmm. And so it took me a while to get out of that one. And I actually called Outreach, who is a connection of mine, not a connection, but I was constantly, speaking with this nurse. And so she was like my consult, if you will, saying, are you sure? Like, are you sure you got this right? Like, are you absolutely sure she has FTD and dementia? Because I think she's psychotic. Because we had a couple of other uproars that were really, really dramatic as when we were there as well. And, I just couldn't help it. And she said, yeah, it's often diagnosed as psychosis, but it's not psychosis. The shoplifting is part of the FTD. And it's totally executive functioning. And it's the thrill, the glint in your eye that you get from 5-finger discount. And so...
And you don't have documentation to really, convince anyone.
There's no stamp on your passport. There's no little symbol on your license, your driver's license, which, of course, at that point, you never had. That was the next thing to fall, like right away after the diagnosis. So, and that changed my life because now I lost my freedom. Now I had to take on her life entirely. And so I was fully invested.
So you mean those windows of her going for a drive and giving you a reprieve?
I thought she was driving pretty good at the time, but I did acknowledge the fact that, anything could happen at any time. But I also acknowledged the fact that anybody out there driving that I've seen, anything could happen anytime too. Yes. I thought people come at me in the wrong direction in traffic circles. She wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
But I acknowledge the fact that, your memory can fail and all of a sudden you can't hit that child or you can't hit that older person or anybody really. So that went.
Well, one of the things talked about is the fact that you really honored who she was.
Yeah.
But kept her safe. Right? The idea of and balancing that and understanding that, honoring who she is, but also keeping her safe. I think that's so beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. That was, we were always free spirits and together and alone. And so I kind of like took on the concept of that, how bad can it really get? You only have so much time. And we, as a couple, only have so much time. Go your limit. Be who you are or who you think you are or whatever you can still do, things you can still say, whatever, from now until it gets, really narrow. And I will just like customize it along the way and make sure you're really safe and make sure that you're taken care of and make sure that, you have the freedoms and you can do whatever you feel you can. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we continued for the next couple of years. And there were moments, there were definitely moments. And we still were able to maintain like some of our lifestyle. Like, we would sit in the evenings more often than not, probably 3-4 times a week and have appetizers, hors d'oeuvres and a glass of wine like most people would now. Because that's, and when you get to be a certain age, like that's the highlight of your life in a way, right?
My
wife
is going to ask me now, how come we don't have hors d'oeuvres and wine?
Yeah, because you're not out of my house.
I know.
But we did that through traveling too. So we had like a longevity of doing that. We tried to enjoy ourselves. And we didn't overdo it, but we certainly, we knew the value of like wellness in terms of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so we tried to enjoy ourselves. And so we still maintain that level. But to be emphatic to your point, like I'd keep an eye on her, like in social situations, like we have functions that we were going to that would have 40 to 70 people at sometimes, but they all knew us and they all knew her and they all went right along with it.
Right.
And it was fantastic. And There were moments.
That's a good sense of community there.
It is,
Yeah.
and we were lucky to have that.
Yeah.
And those people, like, I'm so grateful to them.
Mm-hmm.
But there were moments. There were moments when I would lose sight of her, and she would forget that she could only have a couple of wines, and she would get really ill and that kind of thing, and I'd have to take her out of there like right away. There was only probably 2 times like that, but they became pronounced, so I had to like keep an eye on that. All of a sudden, note.
Yes.
Note to self.
Yes.
Don't let that happen again. So now I knew I had to watch all the time.
Again, the idea of letting her be who she is, but also safe.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And in every way. So, except when we were traveling. Why we traveled is like another really critical point for caregivers is that as a result of having a diagnosis, they could put me in touch with continuing care. From continuing care comes the fact that you can get caregivers paid and they will support it. They had it according to income at one time. I think now it's probably still according to income in a way, but they will fund most of it. I tried to have under that program caregivers for my wife for about 13 months. And I'm talking like a full 13 months. I tried professional organizations. I tried independents that wanted cash only. I tried a recruiting service that was expensive and came up with an independent that quit. I had all that. And at the last go, I had somebody hired. I paid $4,000 basically for 4 days so I could finally get a break and see my son who lives in Bermuda for Father's Day. And that was 2024. And then after that, I had other straws that I clutched at. And they were Shannocks, for instance. I went up and I talked to them, and I think I probably talked them into like giving me 2 weeks respite. And so that they could take her. I didn't know how I would ever get her in there. I had no idea. But I knew I was at the end of my rope. I had nothing left. People were telling me I was totally depleted. Like neurology told me I got to get help. I need something. I was done. And to give you an idea, like I'm probably 70, 75% back now, maybe 80. Mm-hmm. But I was at 15, maybe even 12, 10.
So you had professionals making these assessments about your health.
I did.
As the caregiver.
They became really worried about me.
Yeah.
Because they told me, they said, which really amazed me, they told me that the burnout factor for caregivers caring for FTD patients was really high. Now I'm looking at it, I'm this guy, I'm like Superman, I can handle anything, and I can, right? And so I don't pay a lot of attention to that. But I'm going to say that it did get me. It was, I did everything I could do. And I was burned out. And I was in what I would call a wormhole, and my ankles were out dangling still. And I knew they were out there, but everything else was tucked in tightly, and I couldn't wiggle out. And I didn't know how to get out. And so that was a really unique experience for me.
Not knowing how to get out also is part of it as well. Again, that
probably
of being that hopelessness, the severity of what you were going through, and also that it also brings to the point that again to other caregivers out there, we all have a point. We all have these points of breaking or being overdrawn. And how do you, through that, such a difficult process, thank God, again, you had people looking out for you, making you aware of that, validating how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Because that's an important thing too, because you can't even kind of, I would imagine, I'm going to be speaking for you, but thinking clearly.
You can speak for me.
But
if you go off the path, I'll correct you.
I appreciate that. But that's the other part of it too, where it's just that, how do you, your ankles are hanging out. You're in the spiral. You're upside down. The world that you knew is not what it was. The woman you love is ill, and you might see glimmers and moments of who she is, but so much of often who she was is still is not there for you, but you need to still be there for her.
Yeah.
So that emotional weight, how was that when you went from that moment of being kind of coached or told that you need to get this help? What did that look like after that?
Well, I really don't know. I mean, all I can say is that, I had in my support group, I had two people that I became really kind of tight with because they were guys, number one. And one I had known before, we were both surprised to see each other there, and knew my wife Anita really, really well. And his wife was also a master gardener at the time. And he looked at me and said, "You're going to have a heart attack." And my other friend looked at me and said the same thing. We both had heart attacks, and we're here. And this is why we did. And I'm looking at you, and I know what you're going through, and you are going to have a heart attack for sure. And then my sister-in-law and her husband came down to see me, and she was a blessing and still is. And they live in BC. She's been in touch with me about this forever and constantly. And they came down together, and I know them really, really well because, from my wife, et cetera. And he took me to lunch, and he told me, "I'm talking to you as a brother." And he said, "You have to do something about this because everybody only has so much rope, and you're at the end of this one." So from there, I mean, obviously they knew before I did. And because I was still Superman.
And they had also lived it.
They had.
And so,
Yeah.
and that, again, empathy and compassion for you to say, "I'm looking at this right now." And
yeah. And I mean, he said to me, "We love Anita."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, her sister loves Anita, but he said, "We can both see that you are definitely going downhill." Like I had, at that point in time, I had also lost quite a bit of weight, but it was only because of just nervous duress probably. But, I mean, I was able to work out at the gym all the time, and that helped me a little bit. That was an escape too. So, in my moments, but, yeah, I mean, I don't know how to describe, what shape and condition I was in, but I can say that it was really mental duress. And I think it was like, it's true what they say. They say that, it's a common saying that dementia takes two lives. Well, it does. It does take two lives, whether you know it or admit it or not. It definitely does. And the other one that's fairly true is probably that, you say goodbye twice. And so is like once with the dementia itself, and then once when the last day comes.
Thank you for tuning in to part 1 of Patrick and Anita's story. Part 2 will be coming out next month, and you can find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.